por aquellos con discapacidades, por los mayores de edad, por cobertura médica, por el planeta, por nuestros cuerpos, por la igualdad, por el amor, por la educación, por la seguridad de nuestras escuelas, vecindarios y comunidades, por una jubilación con seguridad, por oportunidades, por un salario justo, por los veteranos y las familias Gold Star, por los olvidados, por nuestros principios, por la verdad, por el progreso, por nuestra democracia, por nuestro país, por nuestro futuro. Nosotros somos el partido de la gente. Nosotros somos demócratas.
Hola! This video makes me so proud to be a Democrat. Somos demócratas. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Thank you for tuning in. We are thrilled and grateful to have you join us on day one of the Democratic National Committee Convention. We have a jam-packed schedule, so let's begin with a salute by one of our nation's veteran leaders. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be recited by Lawrence Romo from San Antonio, Texas, a U.S. Air Force veteran, national commander of the American GI Forum, and a convention delegate. Larry, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So much. I want to take a quickly to acknowledge our Hispanic Caucus officers. I want to start off from Montana, Jorge Quintana, one of my caucus vice chairs, Alma Gonzalez from the beautiful state of Florida, secretary and the treasurer, and of course, our wonderful good friend from Virginia, Leopoldo Martinez. He's our caucus finance chair. And without everyone knows this great woman, I just want to do a shout out to a great DNC vice chair, and that's my good colega, Senator Maria Elena Durasco from California. Thank you all for being part of this team. Thank you for being part of a overall great convention that we're going to have virtually. So I'm looking forward to it. So now it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Julian Castro. Served as a U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Barack Obama from 2014 to 2017. Before that, he was mayor of native San Antonio, Texas, the youngest mayor of the top 50 American cities at the time. In 2012, he gave a rousing keynote speech at the Democratic National Committee, during which he described the American dream as a relay to be passed from generation to generation. In October of 2018, Brown published Castro Memoir as Unlikely Journey, Waking Up from My American Dream. Secretary Castro launched People First Future in May to help elect bold, progressive candidates whose campaigns are focused on improving the lives of all people that they represent. He is an amazing global leader, a 2020 presidential candidate. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Julian Castro.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us here today. I want to especially thank Senator Martinez as our caucus chair for her hard work, and all of the caucus chairs throughout each and every one of our states and our nation. It was such a pleasure during my presidential run to get to meet many of the people who I know are on this Zoom call, and to appreciate the wonderful work that you're doing in your own communities and nationally to ensure that we have a great November, and most importantly, that we change the course of this country for the better by electing Joe Biden president, and senators, governors, people up and down the ballot. I only have a few minutes to speak to you today, and so I thought that I would get right to the point. I don't have to tell the folks on this call that the Latino community is in a state of emergency. On the one hand, Latinos, as the theme of today's meeting says, we have been essential workers during this pandemic period. It is Latinos who have been out in the fields, making sure that people have food on their table, working in places like meat packing plants, ensuring, again, that folks have the meat that they want to eat, working as grocery store workers and fast food workers, working in the healthcare sector. Oftentimes, Latino families have gotten low pay and meager benefits. And at the same time, the community has been very hard hit by the virus itself. In many communities, Latinos have the highest infection rate, the highest hospitalization rate, and the highest mortality rate because of the coronavirus. One statistic said that 84% of Latinos could not do their job from home. If they wanted to earn a living, they have to go to their job. A lot of Latino small business owners today are hurting, and many were not able to access the PPP program that the administration shaped. And so there is added urgency today as we seek an America where everybody, no matter who you are, is able to work hard and to reach their dreams. There's added urgency to ensure that we do everything that we can to elect Joe Biden, the next president of the United States, to ensure that our Democrats are able to win important Senate races all over this country and take back the United States Senate, and also to win more House seats, state representative seats, state senator seats, and seats up and down the ballot. I know that I'm preaching to the choir, because if you're part of this Zoom call and you're part of the caucus, that means that you've given a lot of time, a lot of energy, probably even a lot of your dollars over the years to making sure that good Democrats are elected. I just want to ask you in these few months that we have left until November 3rd to redouble your efforts. Our community is counting on you, no matter what state you're in, to make sure that we drive out the vote in November. And the Latino vote is going to be more crucial than ever before. Think about it. In 2016, we lost to Donald Trump, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by just 77,000 votes collectively. Latinos have been growing in those states. We lost Florida by a point or point and a half. Of course, the Latino vote is tremendously important there, but also in places like North Carolina, which is gettable this year, and in new states that are on the map for the taking, like Georgia and Arizona, and where I'm talking to you from today, my home state of Texas, with its 38 electoral votes. We know that Joe Biden has a strong vision for America that includes the Latino community and so many investments that would help our community, beginning with making sure that every American is able to get good health care, that everybody in this country can have the health care that they deserve, that we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that we invest in universal pre-K so our young people get a great start in their educational journey, that we make college available and much more affordable so that everybody can get a higher education if they want it. And also that we bring back common sense and compassion to our immigration system. And so I hope that you will work alongside so many others across this country to elect Joe Biden in November and take back the United States Senate. I look forward to watching on election night as we see the results come in and we win places like Florida and Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Arizona and even my home state of Texas. And that will be due in no small measure because of the hard work of you and of Latinos across this country who believe that we can have a brighter future. Thank you.
Hello, Latino Democrats. I am Mickey Ibarra, founder and chairman of the Latino Leaders Network and past chair of the DNC Hispanic Caucus. Greetings to Senator Ines Martinez of Chicago, who, of course, is your current chair. Well, it was not possible for us to host you for lunch, as we have for every convention since Boston 2004. The Latino Leaders Network was able to convene a virtual event last week to honor Senator Catherine Cortez Masto with our Eagle Leadership Award. At our event, we were treated to a powerful, inspirational musical salute by Las Cafeteras of Los Angeles that really captured so beautifully the many voices that must be heard from our Latino community during this 2020 campaign. And with over 750 Latino delegates elected to represent their party this week during the convention, we feel like we're well on the way. And now, please enjoy Las Cafeteras singing If I Was President.
Si fuera presidente, honestamente, si fuera presidente, para mi gente, si fuera presidente, honestamente, presidente, para mi gente.
If I was president, if I was president, I'd cancel rent, bail out my people, not say it from the steeple. Laptops for raza so they can stay in casa. Free education, universal health care, no hesitation. And my first lady would beat my mom, cause she'd smack me in the head if I was dropping bombs. And I'd free my poor black and brown kids that got caught up in 3 strikes. And when they get out, I'ma give them free bikes so they can ride to the future, not to the past. Yo, yo, yo. Me gusta la lima, me gusta limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción. Me gusta la lima, me gusta el limón.
Si fuera presidente, honestamente, si fuera presidente, para mi gente, si fuera presidente, honestamente, presidente, para mi gente.
Remember that in these 2 hands is the power to destroy or create. Another world is possible, so why wait on a president or Congress to come save us when we are the ones we've been waiting for? And the only way to know how far we can go is if we put our power together like this. Put your power together like this. If you're at home, clap along like this. Put your power together like this. Whole world, clap along.
Me gusta la lima, me gusta el limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción. Me gusta la lima, me gusta el limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción.
Latino Leaders Network.
Me gusta el limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción.
Senator Masto, paving the way.
Pero no me gusta tanta corrupción. Me gusta la lima, me gusta el limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción. Me gusta la lima, me gusta el limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Ella tenía un corazón bien grande. Mis hijos la llamaban Yeya. Uno no podía entrar a su casa sin comer, sin un plato, sin un abrazo, sin un beso. En abril dio positivo a COVID y de allí todo pasó bien rápido. Yo pienso que el presidente no tenía plan, que él estaba más preocupado por abrir negocios que por la vida humana. El presidente minimizaba el riesgo desde el principio. Las enfermeras nos conectaron con ella en el iPad y ella no podía hablar. Oramos todos juntos. Era bien difícil parar el video. La cosa que me duele en el corazón es que ella murió sola y no podíamos estar con ella.
Hello, everyone. Buenos dias, buenas tardes. My name is Julie Chavez Rodriguez, and I'm a senior advisor with Joe Biden's campaign. And I'm so excited to join you all today as part of the DNC Hispanic Caucus events, and really honored to be able to moderate our first panel discussion, which is so vital. We know that Latinos have been hit hard by COVID-19, and they've been disproportionately impacted from a public health perspective, from an economic perspective, and also continuing to work on the front lines responding to this crisis. And so with us, we have some amazing panelists to be able to share with you what they're seeing in their own states, in their own communities, and with their own workers that they represent. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first panelist up, who needs no introduction. She is a leader, a champion, our senator from the great state of Nevada, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. Senator?
Julie, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I am glad to have the opportunity to join you all today to talk about the COVID pandemic and its impact on the Latino community. But first of all, let me just say thank you to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the DNC for bringing attention to this important issue and for your support to our community during the COVID-19 pandemic. Listen, it is clear. We have seen data, we have seen information that shows that the Latino community has been disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus. I come from the great state of Nevada. A third of the population are Latino, and we have seen it here. I have seen the data here in the state of Nevada. And why are we having this impact? We already know, first of all, that Latinos face barriers to accessing healthcare and serious health disparities that put us at higher risk for chronic illnesses like asthma and heart disease. And now many in our community find themselves designated as essential workers. In every industry, from healthcare, education, to agriculture and hospitality, Latinos are putting their own health at risk while working on front lines to help others in need during this pandemic. We have seen this here in Nevada. This is here, particularly in Southern Nevada, where we have a robust hospitality industry who has been so hard hit. It has been so hard hit by this pandemic. And we've seen many of the workers who are Latino having that impact. We also see, unfortunately, too many left behind as a result of some of the packages that we have passed and the CARES Act that we have passed and so many others. Too many were left. And quite honestly, irregardless of your immigration status, everybody should have access to healthcare at this important time, particularly when we are trying to stem the spread of this virus. So that's why it is so important that in the Senate, we continue the work that the House has done to really focus on how we address this disparity in our communities of color and how we work toward bringing relief. The House has done its job. And now the Senate must do its job. The Democrats in the Senate are aligned. We have already introduced legislation to make sure that our communities are taking care of the Latino communities who need access to healthcare, who need access really to the testing that is appropriate, to the PPE. So many of our dreamers, and we're going to talk about it, are on the front lines right now in this healthcare industry, providing healthcare services, and they're being left behind. So I can't speak more than ever to say that not only have we left behind too many Latinos across this country, more needs to be done. And we know so many Latinos are small business owners who need access to capital. And so the funding that comes from the CARES Act and the next package is going to be crucial to make sure those businesses survive as well. So I am excited to be a part of the panel today. I am so proud of our community, not just here in Nevada, but across the country, because we are united. We know that by putting Joe Biden in the White House and putting Kamala Harris in as the vice president, we are going to have friends who are going to support and bring and uplift our Latino communities across this country. And that is needed now more than ever, because we have seen an administration that has divided us, that has torn us apart, that ripped families apart, and has called us names and done everything they could to turn individuals and our neighbors against us. And it's time to change that. It is time to unite around what this great country is about. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. And I'm so excited to be on the panel with the guests that are joining me today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. Now I'd like to invite our next speaker up. Representative Joaquin Castro is the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and has been helping to lead the charge. As you mentioned, the House of Representatives has acted, and they've acted with courage. They've acted with leadership. They've really demonstrated what it is that we need to do for our country in a time of crisis. So without further ado, Representative Castro, I'd like to invite you up and thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you to my fellow panelists also for being here as well. I'm Joaquin Castro, and I'm very proud to represent the great city of San Antonio, Texas, in the United States Congress, and to be chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. We're 39 members strong, and we're continuing to grow. And as you all know, Latinos are not only in the big states of places like Texas and California and Florida and New York and Illinois, but increasingly in places like Iowa and also places like Minnesota and South Carolina and many other wonderful communities across the country. And that has been very special to see Latino communities electing their first state representatives, first school board members, our first city council members. And in the coming years, that growth will only continue. But at the same time, this has been a very difficult few years for the Latino community. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, from the time that he came down those escalators at Trump Tower, began to scapegoat the Latino community and immigrants, calling Mexican immigrants criminals and rapists. And since then, he's not let up. He's put kids in cages, he's separated families at the border, and he's abused human rights. The Latino community and other communities have paid a heavy price during Donald Trump's presidency. So it's imperative that in November, all of us get out to vote, get our family members out to vote, do everything that we can to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and send them to the White House and send them to govern this country and say goodbye to what has been a nightmare of an era for us. I want to speak for a second also to the trying time that Latinos are going through right now. As Senator Cortez Masto mentioned, the Latino community has been devastated during this pandemic, both in terms of its health effects, but also in terms of the economic effects. We know that for many in the community, working from home was never an option. You had so many Latino workers that were working in the fields, that were working in meatpacking plants, working as caregivers in nursing homes, and other places where the coronavirus was especially rampant. But you also had people that were grocery store clerks, folks that were nurses and other medical care workers, and so many other Latinos and Latinas who were helping to take care of the people of this country during the coronavirus. And that remains true today. But in part because of that, we've also seen higher infection rates among the Latino community. In fact, according to one analysis, Latino children were 8 times more likely than white children to be hospitalized because of this coronavirus. The economic effects also can't be overstated. You know, for many years after the Great Recession, the Latino community was on a comeback, regaining its economic wealth. Latinas were the fastest growing entrepreneurs in the country. But the pandemic has also put a huge dent in that and made it hard for people to keep their jobs and also for small business owners, Latinos and Latinas, to continue running their businesses. So the Latino community has been especially devastated economically by this pandemic. That's why it's imperative, as the senator mentioned, that this Congress act. A $1,200 one-time payment, as you all know, was not enough to sustain American families, but also not enough to sustain Latino families, many of whom are already at the edge economically of American society. The $600 a week in unemployment benefits are an essential lifeline for many of our Latino families, and Congress should step up and make sure that that's delivered to all of the American people. And so I wanted to be here to let you all know that the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is working hard to do all of these things. Over the years, we've been speaking up for dreamers, speaking out against kids in cages, speaking up for the people that have been harmed by Donald Trump and his policies. And we've got just a few more months to go, all of us, again, to make sure that we can put a new president, Joe Biden, in the White House and finally turn the corner on this nightmare of an era. With that, I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Thank you so much, Congressman Castro. And just to remind folks, 78 days left. It's only 78 days until Election Day. And so we need to do everything that we can to ensure that our community is engaged. And one thing that you mentioned, Congressman, that really segues into our next speaker is that many of our Latino workers have not had the option to be able to work from home and to be able to have that choice. And we know that there's a huge industry out there that's ensuring we have food on our table and our grocery stores and shelves are filled. And those are the farm workers that are picking our food every day. And so next up, I'd like to bring the president of the United Farm Workers, Teresa Romero, to share some stories with us.
Thank you very much, Julie. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those of you who are on the East Coast. I truly appreciate the opportunity of being here with you today with this great panel. Our country is definitely going through very challenging times, and the next 78 days will be crucial. We know that farm workers have always been essential. The COVID crisis has reminded the rest of the country that farm workers are essential. As Julie just mentioned, many of us have the ability to work remotely and have been doing so for several months already. But farm workers cannot work remotely to harvest our fruits, vegetables, our dairy. Today, the temperatures will reach here in California in the Central Valley, 111 degrees. No federal coordinated COVID testing, and farm workers are often left out. That means that we don't know the full extent of the impacts on farm workers and their families. The one community in the country identifying COVID cases, Monterey County in California, that is also known as America's Salad Bowl, farm workers are 3 times as likely to get COVID as all of other residents. And COVID has been deadly for farm workers. In Florida, there is a report of a farm worker whose employer claimed COVID was a hoax. There have been worker deaths in every part of the country due to COVID. But farm workers are not treated like other essential workers. Farm workers are left out of federal law, including the Jim Crow era racist exclusion of farm workers from equal rights to overtime pay. Unfortunately, the immigration status for many of our farm workers means regardless of how many years they have spent feeding the rest of us and helping build our communities, they're not eligible for basic supports that most Americans receive. That is why we're doing everything we can over the next 50 days before ballots start to arrive, and the next 78 days until the final day to vote to make sure we elect Joe Biden as president and Kamala Harris as vice president. Joe Biden was an early supporter as a senator in 2003 of the United Farm Worker Negotiated Agricultural Legalization Program. And winning a special legalization program for farm workers so they can earn citizenship is part of this year's Democratic Party platform. And we know that Joe Biden sees us all when he picked the best person for the job, Senator Kamala Harris. And can I just say, I am so excited that Kamala Harris will be our next vice president. Senator Harris is fighting for farm workers now to win overtime pay. We want these protections for farm workers in California, and now we're working with her to get these benefits for farm workers throughout the United States. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris believe all workers should get paid for their work. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democratic Party have adopted many of the recommendations of the United Farm Workers, worked with Congressional Hispanic Caucus Chairman Joaquin Castro. In California, we want protections for farm workers to protect them from heat illness. This includes provide cold water to the workers, shade, and rest. And when temperatures go over 95 degrees, they're entitled to a paid break every hour. Like I say, today will be 111 degrees in many agricultural areas in California. As member of Congress, Judy Chu introduced the Asunción Valdivia heat illness. The name of the bill is for a farm worker who unfortunately died because of the high temperatures. Senator Cortez Masto supports overtime pay and farm worker legalization. So this tells us it really matters who we elect. I know our time is limited, so I am going to suggest that you all read the Congressional Hispanic Caucus letter on essential measures that should be taken for essential farm workers. Farm workers are still invisible to too many Americans. In the month of October, for those of you who can vote by mail, and on November 3rd, for everyone else, we have the chance to vote for people who have always seen farm workers. Thank you very much, and sí se puede.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I really appreciate your comments and sharing some of the stories of those working on the front lines to ensure that we are fed. Our final panelist, and last but definitely not least, is a state representative from Massachusetts, Dr. John Santiago, who we're honored to be joined by today. Dr. Santiago?
Great. Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be, my fellow Democrats. Thank you, Julie, for hosting this event and moderating. And it's an honor to be on here with the senator, with the congressman, and with my union sister in service. As you said, Julie, I've had two roles during this whole epidemic, that of an emergency room doctor and the busiest ER in New England, and that of a state legislator representing a diverse district in Boston. And let me just say it's been an honor, pleasure, and quite a challenge to be living and working in both those roles. And it's really why I got into politics in the first place. I mean, what I learned working in an ER is that the people that show up there, whether it's a stroke, heart attack, gunshot wound, they show up there as a result of what's going on in their respective communities. And what I would argue are the social determinants of health. And that's no different in the era of COVID. Throughout this whole COVID surge, particularly in Massachusetts, I mean, with New York, we had a pretty significant surge here. We were top 1, 2, 3 in the country when it came to infection stats early on. And during that time, I actually doubled my hours in the ER because I felt they needed the human resource capacity. I worked every single week during our COVID surge here. And you name it. I mean, from week one, where we had, quite frankly, no idea what the hell was going on in terms of the disease process, how we treat it, to issues of PPE, the lack of information and testing. To see that happen and to go through it was an intense experience. But it really showed to me stuff that I think many of us on the call already knew. And it exacerbated the disparity in our communities, particularly our Latino communities, and some that I represent. And it helped me to inform some of the legislation that I introduced, that I fought for in the House of Representatives here in Boston, Massachusetts. And I want to share one example with you, particularly when it comes to a small community just outside Boston. It's called Chelsea, Massachusetts. And, you know, Boston is a diverse city, but Chelsea is just outside, and it's 66% Latino. It's a community defined by air pollution, a community defined by a high number of essential workers, intergenerational housing, poverty. And as a result, Chelsea was just absolutely devastated by the virus. The infection rate in Chelsea was double that of some of the Boston's hardest hit environments. I saw patients from Chelsea each and every shift I worked, and it was tough. Folks being poor, Latino, intergenerational housing, essential workers, you name it. But as a result of those experiences, working with them and understanding their communities and really fighting for them, I was fortunate to work with colleagues to really stand up and push legislation, whether it was on standards of care, whether it was on trying to get the best race, ethnicity data that we possibly could, to really address the COVID-19 situation. But it's important to note, as I was commenting earlier, that so much of why places like Chelsea has been hit especially hard is a result of the social determinants of health, right? The lack of education opportunities, the lack of economic opportunities, and the poverty there. And so as a legislature, we were able to come back and do some of the stuff that's been at the federal level, whether it's a housing moratorium, whether it's legislation on voting by mail or to increase testing. That's what we've been fighting for. And so as we've been able to beat back the surge in Massachusetts, we in the past couple of weeks have seen an uptick in cases. And I've seen that in my ER, I've seen that in my community, and I've seen that across the state. And as was the case in the first surge, Latinos are being disproportionately hit hard. And so my ask to you, everyone on the call, my brothers and sisters in service there, is as we move forward to the election, that we continue to advocate, use this opportunity, not just as a time to say, look, Latinos are being hit the hardest, but to innovate and to double down on our commitment to addressing the social determinants of health. And that starts with voting in November and making sure that we put those in office who are going to respond to our needs and to our interests. And I'm so excited to be a part of that and look forward to championing those causes in November. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. We really appreciate your voice and your perspective, and obviously your tireless efforts there in the ER and all that you and the medical professionals have been doing on the front lines to literally save lives during this pandemic. So I think we have time for maybe a couple of quick questions from our panelists. And so I'll start with you, Senator. I know that you are leading a tremendous effort across the country to ensure that we have a Senate that will take swift action on bills like COVID, come next Congress. But what can folks do right now to help ensure that Latino voices are heard and the impact on the Latino community is heard in this current, fight to get more support and more funding to our states and to our communities?
Thank you, Julie. That's a great question, because that is our biggest challenge. That's what I'm finding here in Nevada, particularly amongst our Latino community. The key to getting them services right now is educating them and outreach to them, because they have been left behind, and the concerns that they have within our community with challenges for jobs, you heard it, wages, and trying to put food on the table for their families and still going to work, and literally many of them being laid off in a hospitality industry. The goal is to reach everyone. So what we have done, and I think everybody in their community across the country, is identify those areas where that disparity is happening, particularly in the Latino community, and then work together to bring that outreach. So what we have done here in Nevada, particularly in Southern Nevada, where it's been so hard hit, is our local government, state government folks, and then the private sector, everybody got together to engage in a Spanish-speaking, bilingual outreach to our community, so that they know that there are services that are available. Too many were left behind, but there are still services that so many of us put together to help our community. So that's one. Two, like on my website, I have a resource guide, COVID resource guide, and it's in English and Spanish, so that anybody that needs assistance can reach out, and we'll be there to provide them assistance. So I think if you're working in your community, it's providing that outreach and education is the first step. We know what we need to do in Congress. We're doing it now, and that's a fight. And the goal here is this election cycle, by putting Joe Biden in the White House, that is going to help so many people in our community right now, passing federal legislation. But in the meantime, when we're in our communities, that outreach right now and educating our community and talking with them is going to be key to getting them the services they need.
Definitely. And I know that so many of our organizations have really pivoted quickly to make sure that they're providing, helping to deliver food, making sure that seniors have access to the services that they need while still being able to stay safe and protected. And so being able to fold, like you said, education, outreach, voter registration efforts into those sort of connections with our community are things that we can all continue to build on. Representative Castro, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that question, or if you also want to talk about, I think, the struggle that our Latino small businesses are facing. You mentioned that they were on a tremendous upward trajectory before COVID hit. And I worry that not only will we no longer see that kind of growth, but for those that existed, that they'll have to close their doors and no longer employ their workforce. So what can you share about efforts to support our small businesses?
Oh, well, you're absolutely right. Since the Great Recession, right, you're talking about the last 11 or 12 years, Latino small businesses were on the rise. And there were a few years, at least, where Latinas were the fastest growing entrepreneurs in the nation. And so this very positive momentum for the community in terms of its small business ownership has been just about decimated because of this pandemic. And most of all, because of the lackluster response and the terrible response, both by President Trump and many of the governors in different states, like my home state of Texas, Governor Abbott, who followed Donald Trump's lead. And so behind each of these businesses is a story. And I want to tell you briefly about a call that I got in San Antonio of a third generation Latino business, a restaurant. It's a restaurant group. And these folks were telling me that even though their family started this 3 generations ago, that they're running out of financing, they're running out of cash to support their businesses, their restaurants, and that if the Congress doesn't act, businesses like theirs are going to close permanently. They're never going to come back, even after the pandemic. And unfortunately, I think all American business, or most American businesses, are being hit, but Latino and Latina small businesses are being hit especially hard. We saw that was true with the PPP program. You had many Latino and Latina businesses that didn't have a permanent relationship with a lender, for example. And so they were beaten to the door often by larger businesses or quote unquote small businesses under a larger umbrella company because those folks already had an established relationship with a lender. So for different reasons, this pandemic has been especially harmful to Latino wealth and wealth creation. And it's going to take quite a while to bounce back. But I know that President Biden and Vice President Harris will make sure and focus on getting Latino community back on its feet.
Definitely. I think some of the important things that both you and the senator mentioned, it's, in the hospitality industry that we know there is an overwhelming Latino workforce. It's like 95% unemployment rates with right. Latino small businesses. And like you said, the first round of PPP, 90% of it did not go to Latino or African-American owned businesses, and instead went to larger businesses and corporations. And so when we look at not just the failed leadership of Trump from the get-go on this pandemic, but at every single turn, it really has continued to devastate our communities in tremendous ways. Dennis, I'd like to, just ask, as you all are, obviously preparing and continuing to identify ways to be able to support the farm worker community, what are some, efforts that maybe folks can plug into, whether it's to help on the advocacy side or help on some of the, direct service side to support farm workers that are working today?
Julie, farm workers, as we all know, work in remote areas, and for the most part, they're not educated. They're not informed. Their employer is not letting them know what the rights are and how to keep themselves safe. Obviously, the work that we're doing in advocacy, as I said earlier, many farm workers, or not many, farm workers are excluded from federal protections. So when we have these people who are working day after day to put food on our tables, and we don't know if they are kept safe, we all are at risk. Our farm workers' lives are important. Their safety, their health is important. So we need to understand that if we are having any federal laws, protections that are going to protect all of us from COVID, being sick pay, getting tested, being able to stay home if one of their children or their spouse is sick, that farm workers are not excluded. Because when we do that, we're creating second-class citizens. And we're saying that their well-being is not important. We're saying that the work that they're doing is not important. However, like we said earlier, they have been deemed essential workers by this administration. we need to start treating them as essential.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I know that we are coming up on time. I think we do have time for maybe one more question. And so, State Representative Santiago, I'd like to get your perspective, just, as we wrap up our conversation. Really, what's the most important thing that we need to be doing right now as a country to ensure that we're both keeping our community safe, but starting to think about what our pathway is to being able to reopen and really listen to experts like you and folks from the medical field and public health sector?
Well, I think what we need right now, and I think why we're on this phone call, is that we want to see change at the federal level. We've had a disastrous Trump administration. Complete lack of federal policy when it comes to testing. People who don't believe in science, and people who are, what I would argue, are sabotaging the entire process. And as a result, people are dying each and every day. I mean, I worked a shift just this past overnight, and I admitted several patients with COVID. And my hope is that when I go back to the hospital in a couple of days, that they'll still be alive. And that's what we need right now. And I want to be, super appreciative of the governors who've done an excellent job of taming the virus in their respective states, but they can't do it alone. And, we've had Congress, the House of Representatives. I want to thank Congressman Castro for being a part of the effort to pass the $3 trillion stimulus. And I know that the Senator is working just as hard on the Senate side to get that done. But that's what we need right now. We need federal leadership. And, at the state level, we need funds here to get the job done. But I'm hopeful we'll get there. We've been through so much as a country, whether it was a World War II, a recession in 2008. And I'm hopeful that November will turn that page and we'll lead to better days.
Indeed. And you couldn't have said it any better. We are a strong, resilient country and community, and we know that we will continue to fight, we'll continue to advocate, and we will continue to organize and get out the vote to ensure that we have a overwhelming victory in November and a clear mandate for what our community needs and deserves going into this next Biden-Harris administration. So thank you all so much for taking time to share your perspectives. Thank you so much for your leadership and helping to transform our communities at every single level. It's such an honor, and I'm so inspired by today's conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.